Okay, I think we're on. We're on. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. And just to begin, we want to welcome each and every one of you to Sister Reach's monthly social justice preacher series. I am Elder Victor Hanna, faith and education coordinator and faith education outreach coordinator at Sister Reach. Sister Reach is a grassroots 501c3 reproductive justice organization founded by Cherise Scott in 2011 in Memphis, Tennessee. Sister Reach supports the reproductive autonomy of women and teens of color, poor and rural women, LGBTQIA plus people and their families through the framework of reproductive justice. Sister Reach's mission is to empower our base to lead healthy lives, raise healthy families, and is to empower our base to lead, again, healthy lives, raise healthy families, and live in a healthy, sustainable community. This is achieved through working by a four-pronged strategy: education, policy and advocacy, cultural shift, and harm reduction, locally, nationally, and internationally. So today, our guest is Mario Brown. Mario Brown is founder and lead strategist for Life Matters with Mario Brown. He is also lead transformation strategist for Brand Builders Global Initiative. Also on the board of trustee member for the Bolden Group, entrepreneurship vision consultant for Opulence LLC. He is also a YouTube blogger for Life Matters with Mario Brown. His website can be found at www.mariobrown.org. Please help me welcome our Social Justice Preacher Series guest for November 2023, Mario Brown.
Thank you, Elder Hanna. Thank you so very much for you guys having me. I'm so honored, and I thank your founder and CEO, Cherise Scott. She's a dear friend of mine, and I respect the work that she does, and I appreciate the organization. And thank you so much for making this a seamless transition and an easy to do event. So thank you guys so very much for what you do and what you represent. And today we're going to be talking about healthy relationships and low self-esteem. And this is an area, it's almost a benchmark area that I work with in my company, Life Matters. It's a very, I think I would say it's one of the sweet spots that I have in working with relationships. I remember when I first started preaching, one of the things that the Lord said to me was to find a particular area to focus in on that you would specialize in, and it was human relationships. Because everything we do centers around human relationships. Everything is relational. And when the committee and Elder Hanna got with me about what to speak about, this was in my wheelhouse. I think it's important. I want to start with talking about two main areas, two specific areas of human relational impact. And those two areas, first one is historical content, and the second one is historical context. When we talk about healthy relationships, we have to think about the content of our life experience, how we saw relationships play out in our homes, in school, among our friends and family. We have to be observant and consider them, because that's where we learn to do relationships, whether that's good, bad, or indifferent. Your historical content is so important, because as you begin to develop friendships and you get into intimate relationships and work relationships, all of them stem from the content of your history. In other words, you start drawing from every relationship. You begin to see people through the lens of those relationships. And that's why it's just very, very important to understand how important it is when you're meeting people, when you're interacting with people, that you are actually drawing from your own content. It's involuntary. You're not even conscious of it many, many times, but you are drawing each person that you meet. Something may trigger something familiar about them, how they speak, the tone in which they speak, how their body language is now being related to you, how they're standing, how they're approaching you, can vaguely trigger something that has happened out of your past, and you begin to respond because that's in your historical content. This is why it's so important for us. One of the tenets of this organization is harm reduction. And this is why we have to be very careful that we are not mistreating people or harming them because something familiar about them is now triggering us. And so we have to be careful, but that is coming from a sincere place. It's coming from the content in our life, our lived experience. One of the things that I have a problem with is the insensitivity or the lack of empathy with people's lived experience. We can say, because I don't understand it or it makes no sense to me, that then we shouldn't feel, or the person shouldn't feel that. That's absolutely untrue. It is their lived experience. They see life through that lens. Whether you agree with it or not is a totally different story. However, that person, you even, get to see life through that lens. And it is through the healing of trauma that we begin to maybe modify some of the ways we look at situations and how we treat people. But I think it's so important for us to realize that there is content in each person's life. In other words, if you're getting ready to get into a new relationship with somebody, you're getting ready to start seeing them and dating them, or considering marrying them, remember, each person comes with a pre-existing condition. It's just that simple. We all have pre-existing conditions as we enter into these relationships. And that's coming from the content in our life. And so there has to be a way to, deal with that without harming another person, but it comes through understanding and empathy. The next thing that we have to understand is that content helps us or pushes us into forming context. We encounter situations and we see through the lens of that content, and we now see things in a particular context. For instance, if someone says to you, well, I don't understand that. If your content is filled with people who doubted you, who readily accuse you of being stupid, dumb, whatever you're saying makes no sense, then when a person begins to question you, the context around that is, you're calling me dumb. You're calling me a liar. All of that is coming out of the content, right? And so it can feel like, wow, this person is super sensitive. But if we can learn that this is probably coming from some level of trauma, something that has happened that's in the form of their content, their life historical content, then we can approach it with empathy. Likewise, if someone understands that about you, if we all understood that about each other, we would not be so quick to dismiss and disregard each other. So I think that it's so important for us to think about when we think in terms of healthy relationship. My approach is always, and I think this is because as we dialogue, normally when we talk about healthy relationships, it's always in the framework of me and you being in a relationship, or your relationship with trying to get somebody to be in a relationship with you. It's always centered around someone else. But I think that the first relationship that has to be healthy is the one you have with yourself. And the truth of the matter is, if we don't understand our attachment style, which the attachment style is designed, or it develops between the ages of 7 months and 24 months. And according to some scientists or what have you, some psychologists, and that relationship has to do with how our caretakers handled us. We see this a lot. We see this a lot, particularly in African-American homes. When someone has a baby, if the baby is crying, if the baby isn't wet, hungry, teething, earache, you need a diaper change, then Black folk will say, well, that baby just spoiled and want to be held. Put them in the room, close the door, and let them cry themselves to sleep. Well, the truth of the matter is that is an interaction with rejection and abandonment. This is how you start developing that sense of abandonment. I have a need that needs to be attended to, and somehow now I've been accused of something And now I'm punished by putting me in a room, leaving me by myself to cry myself to sleep. Well, medically, what happens is you're not really just crying yourself to sleep. You're actually so upset, you're almost passing out. That's what's happening to a baby. And so you can only imagine what happens when you continually get that treatment. So now you wonder when you meet grown people, why are you such a loner, or why won't you let people in? Now you can say, okay, I wonder what their attachment style was. You know, most times it's a fearful avoidant type of attachment style. And I'll kind of go through those a little bit just to give you the 4 attachment styles so you can understand. I think that it is actually worth each person looking into. Can you imagine if we knew each other's attachment style, how much more successful our relationships could possibly be? Because that attachment style is the basis of how we connect with one another. So the first one, that we'll just go through them, there are 4 very shortly, is a secure attachment. Now, it has been my professional experience that very, very few people have a secure attachment style. And if they do, it is because they have done a lot of work to address their trauma. They've done a lot of work to sit in therapist's office and get some counseling and get some therapy to figure out, why do I behave? The basis of my company is what's behind the behavior. Because what I believe is that when I see a behavior, it's easy to judge a behavior based upon my standards, which I'm not the standard, you're not the standard. But if it doesn't align, then I can really harshly judge this. And what I've learned to do, and it's much prayer for this, is for me, is to look through the eyes of empathy first. That doesn't mean I have to like the person's behavior, not at all. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is when you become an empathetic individual, it becomes very, very powerful for you to consider what's behind this behavior. If this person is constantly pushing me away, if they're constantly afraid to get close and not let anybody in, it's clear that there has been some level of trauma in that life that has not been dealt with. So I think maybe out of 100%, maybe I've met maybe 2% that had a secure attachment style. And out of that 2%, they really did a lot of work. They had to do a whole lot of work to uncover and to develop strategies to become secure in their attachment. But it was not before they learned to have grace and patience with their own development. They had to build their own esteem up and be willing to do the work, because it's not an easy work. I always tell my clients, this is not an easy work. You cannot be timid and do this work to become whole. I remember not long ago, I did a message, wilt thou be made whole? Because we hear a lot of information about, oh, you need to be healed, you need to be healed, you need to be healed. And I started thinking one day, I'm like, well, would it be better to just be healed or to be whole? Because those 2 things are different. Those are 2 different things altogether. And I began to approach it from, what if we are just medicating and we feel healed because we're medicating these areas, but we're not whole. We're just simply not whole. And what happens when we become immune to how we're treating the trauma and it no longer works? That state of that individual is oftentimes worse. But what if we could be made whole, where we would no longer need any sort of medication? We would not have to have byproducts of, we would not have to have things to, hold us and comfort us, because we're actually whole. And this is why it's so important. You think about it, with the man at the pool of Bethesda, Jesus did not ask him, will thou be made healed? Or do you want to be healed? He asked him, do you want to be whole? Which to me signifies that over the 38 years that you've been coming to the same place, over the 38 years that you've been dealing with this illness in your body or this infirmity, there are some other things that have come up in your life, some habits that have been developed, some coping mechanisms that are not really a part of your personality, but these are coping mechanisms that, because you've been practicing them for so long, now you believe that they are really a part of your personality, when they're actually not. They're actually things that you have now developed to help you cope with rejection, abandonment, feeling ridiculed, rejected. All of these things, you develop these mechanisms to help you cope. And so Jesus asked him, will thou be made whole? Do you want to be made whole? because we don't want you just to be able to get in this pool. But even if you get in this pool and you go back home, if you're still operating in all of those mechanisms that no longer align or serve you, then you still look fragmented and broken. And so now it's about being whole, not just being healed, right? Because if that was really working, if, oh, I'm healed, but then you're triggered. But here's the thing about being whole. Once you become whole, the triggers no longer affect you because you are whole. You're not just healed. No medication needed, right? So I want to run back to the secure attachment style. So very few people are willing to do the work because it means actually digging into how you were cared for, which feels a little damning because it means I've got to somehow now see my caretakers as somewhat inadequate. And that's very difficult. That's very difficult to say, well, they didn't mean any harm. Absolutely. I believe that in many cases. But what happens because we're growing up, your mama would have to take you to somebody's house while she worked. Certain things happened. People were molested. People were mistreated, dogged out, hurt, all types of conversations. And you begin to have problems, all right, trusting authority figures, those who were supposed to care for you. You ever wondered why when a mom gets ready to take a child to school for the first time and they have to leave them, both of them are crying. Both of them are crying. It's traumatic, right? And so now it feels like abandonment. If that is mishandled, if it is not properly cared for, it could lead to, later in life, it could lead to attachment style problems. Because you feel like, okay, I'm going to always be abandoned, and I'm being abandoned by the people that I love, that they say they love me, but I have to. It takes a while to work through that. So the secure attachment style is rarely seen without a lot of work. The next one is the anxious preoccupied attachment style. And people with this anxious preoccupied attachment style seek a high level of closeness and approval from their partners, but may worry about the possibility of rejection. They may be overly dependent on their partners for validation and reassurance, and they may experience heightened emotional highs and lows in the relationship. This one is dominant. I see this in a lot of people. These are the people that want a relationship, but they're so afraid of being rejected that they will sometimes self-sabotage. Because if it starts feeling too good, you're saying things in your mind like, I don't want to get too close, or I don't want to get too comfortable because I always get hurt, or it never ends up right. So I have to approach this carefully. I'm going to not call them. I'm going to wait till they call me. I'm not going to ask, do you want to do anything? I'm going to let them ask me, even though I want to be in their presence, but I'm not going to be the initiator. Why? Because fear is present. I want you, but I'm afraid to let you know I want you because I'm now anxious and preoccupied with abandonment issues. And so even when you're doing nothing to me, I will create a situation. If this is my attachment style, I'll create a situation that makes it appear that you're rejecting me when you're not. You're busy. But so from that day forward, if I initiate something and you say to me, I'm unavailable, I now make a vow to never initiate again, even though I long to be in your presence or I want to hang out with you. I really like you, but because you initially said you were busy, I'm triggered now. So now I have this thing coming up where I'm just afraid, but I'll never let you know I'm afraid. I just won't ask. The next one is dismissive avoidant. Individuals with a dismissive avoidant attachment style tend to value independence and may avoid close emotional connections. They may downplay the importance of emotional intimacy, prefer self-reliance, and may have difficulty trusting others. They often suppress their emotions and may seem emotionally distant in relationships. Now, probably some of you right now probably like, oh my God, that is what's wrong with him. Oh my God, that's what's wrong with her. Or that's what's wrong with me. That's who I am. And I didn't even know what was wrong with me. Absolutely. This is it. I'm telling you, this is the basis. You think about it. This person with a dismissive, avoidant attachment style really is that person who says, I'm independent. I don't need a man. I don't need a woman. I don't really need intimacy. I'm just into my work. And, I'm a loner. I'm fine by myself. I can take it or leave it, kind of a thing. So they avoid this emotional connection. They can talk to you about surface things, but when the conversation becomes deep and it requires an emotional connection, that interconnectedness now feels like violation. I cannot get close to you because I don't trust people enough with my heart or my closest heart thoughts. So I can't really just talk to you like that. So I'm going to avoid ever being in a situation where it's just one-on-one for real. And if I sense that you're trying to now connect with me emotionally, or I feel like I want to connect with you emotionally, but I can't do it because I'm just not sure. What I'm going to do is to avoid you. I'm going to avoid certain conversations. I'm going to avoid even looking at a movie that has emotional connectivity in it because I don't want to have this conversation with you. And so you downplay the emotional need for intimacy. You want to be self-reliant, and it's very difficult for you to trust anybody. So you keep people at arm's length. It feels better just to keep everybody as an associate. This is just somebody I hang out with. It is even difficult when you have this particular attachment style. It is very difficult for you to even use the word, that's my friend, or we're cool, it's safer. Oh, we can hang out, but to say that's my friend, that's my bestie, that's my best friend forever. Oh, I really love them. It is very difficult for you to admit you love someone because it makes you feel vulnerable. It makes you feel, if I say I love you before you say you love me, now I'm putting myself in a very profoundly dangerous position because I am not sure how you're going to respond to me. So even if I feel it, I'm going to avoid being in any situation that we have to say, this is how you, if you've ever noticed, I don't know if you met these kind of people that you've been friends with them for a while. And when, it's time to get off the phone or whatever, or to leave, they will never say bye. I love you. I can't wait to hang out with you again. It's always very dismissive. It is very dismissive. Like, okay, well, we'll get up. It's going to be very dry, very cold, very distant, because I don't want to seem mushy. I don't want to seem over the top with you. So I'm going to even find a language that makes me feel safe. I'm going to find a language that makes me feel not so vulnerable, or it puts me in a position that now I feel like I look needy to you, or I'm looking like I'm desperate to be in your company. I can't do that. So I dismiss you and I avoid even those times when you feel vulnerable, or let's just say you feel like I want company. I want intimacy. But as much as I want it, I'll sit in the same room with you and not hold your hand, not touch you. I won't even look at you, but in my mind, I desire you. In my mind, I want to hold you. I want to be held. But I'll sit here before I let you know that. And the evening progresses, and I'll just finally say, all right, well, I'll get up with you later. And go home totally frustrated because I still didn't get what I wanted. So I avoided. The fourth one is fearful, avoidant attachment. It's often called disorganized. And you'll see why in a second. Individuals with a fearful, avoidant attachment style often experience conflicting desires for closeness and independence. They may be anxious about getting too close to others due to fear of rejection or abandonment. This attachment style can result from experiences of trauma or inconsistent caregiving, leading to a fear of both being too close and too distant. It's so disorganized because this particular person knows skillfully how to push you away, but want to be close to you. They know also how to draw you in. But as soon as you get close to them, then they push you back, right? And all of it is driven by fear of rejection and abandonment. So this is why people, I found out in my practice, this is why people get frustrated in relationships and say, well, I'm confused. I'm getting mixed signals. So if you're on here today and you're listening and you're in a relationship where you're getting mixed signals, I just gave you some insight. This may be what you're dealing with your partner. This person has fearful avoidant attachment style, where they want to be close. They desire to literally be close to you. They like your company. And it almost looks like they're lying Because the minute you're ready to engage for real with them, they push you away. They ghost you. They say things like, "Oh, I didn't see you call. Oh, I didn't see the call come through. Oh, my phone, I was in a dead zone. It didn't ring. I don't know what's going on with my phone." And they really want to answer. They see that you're calling, but they feel vulnerable right now. Some of you may do that to people, and you didn't even know why you're doing this. I'm helping you today because I want you to understand is that this is sometimes a very default mechanism. It is coming from a place of trauma, things that you didn't even know were happening to you. You see, I do a message, it happened at the playground. The playground is a place where there is lifetime trauma. Anywhere from, let's pick a team, and you're not picked. Where do we sit in the sandbox? Well, the light-skinned pretty girls had the boys and they sat on one side of the sandbox, and quote-unquote dark-skinned ugly girls sat over here with no attention. The athletic boys were picked first. The not so athletic guys were left on the sideline and nobody wanted them. And you knew they didn't want you. And so you have to go to school with these same people on a regular basis. You got to go outside to the sandbox. You got to go to the swings. You got to interact with them in classes. But you never forget that they didn't choose you and they let you know you weren't wanted. And this goes through your life. Even when you walk in a room, you're almost expecting a reenactment of what happened at the sandbox, what happened at grandma's house, because this set of cousins was preferred by grandmama and this group wasn't. And all of that is still carried on today. I talk to people on a daily basis who are still suffering from colorism and the mistreatment of that, particularly if they're light-skinned, grandkids versus the brown and dark-skinned grandkids and all of that stuff. That's still very real. And because it's so difficult to talk about it, because it's painful, it's rejection, it's abandonment, it's mistreatment, it's harmful. And you've never had the opportunity to talk about it because if you did, people told you, let it go. Let it go. I mean, that's old. That's 30 years old. You got to get over that. But how do I get over it when it's an unresolved issue? It's still an unresolved issue. This is why the first healthy relationship must be developed with you. And oftentimes you need someone to help you sort it out. Because the work is so hard, you got to have someone who understands what you're going through and has a strong sense of empathy and insight as to what is actually happening to you. So this is why I think it's so important for you to understand that as you are entering these relationships, as you're going through them, it helps to know, how do I attach? My 30 minutes is up. I think I've kind of covered a whole lot. So Elder Hannah, I'm going to turn it back over to you so you can do what you do. I think you're on mute.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. First of all, let me just say, in my introduction, I did not say happy Thanksgiving to not only yourself, but all of the viewers as well. Yes. You and I talked earlier and kind of forgot that Thanksgiving is tomorrow. So happy Thanksgiving to everybody. This is your presentation was absolutely amazing. And so I do have this portion, well, the beginning where you started off talking about the content versus the context. And I think when we talk about, or at least from the lens of quote unquote, the church, I think this lays very heavy on even how we treat or mistreat one another in the confines of the church, right? Absolutely. So can you talk about a little bit in regards to some things that maybe your experience from a professional perspective, as well as being a religious leader, how these content and context may have collided and what the resolve is?
Sure, thank you. That's an excellent question. And it does happen within the house of God. If you notice, when we started talking about, or this thing started trending about church hurt, how people were mocked, people were dogged out, laughed at, dismissed even by other leaders. And when that leadership rejection takes place, you're now adding insult to injury. Everybody didn't get hurt in the church because they didn't want to obey or submit. There is within the house of God a very abusive nature because of the power structure. And so what happens is when you start going to church, because you have to remember that we received our religious beliefs before we could read a Bible. We were taught denominationalism. We were taught the superiority of our denomination. If you went to a Pentecostal church, if you went to an apostolic church, and people said to you, praise the Lord, they thought you were saved then. That meant you were saved. You were approved. If they say, oh, good morning, you didn't get saved. You're not filled with the Holy Ghost. You're not baptized in Jesus' name. And we're going to let you know that, and everybody else is going to know that. You go to Church of God in Christ, you understand there's this handling of how you're perceived, if you're anointed or not. And if you can't sing, if you can't play, if you can't pray, or if you came out of a Baptist church to the Kojic church, you have to be almost hazed in because they made sure that you understood you didn't grow up Kojic. You know, you weren't born in this. Oh, you still Baptist. It's all of that that's going on. And all of that piles up to the point that you don't even feel worthy of the love of God because you've been taught denominationalism. And so that now is a part of the content, which now affects your context. Because now you're looking through the lens of what has been said to you, how you have been handled, mishandled, mistreated, misaligned, all of these things, the harm, only for the leaders to say, y'all are walking around here talking about church. You just don't want to submit. This about God. No, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not. Because we have to go through humans before we ever get to God. And that's a problem. That's a very serious problem, that I can't get to God because I got all of these power-hungry people who have now taken their power to rule over me. And now I have to be mistreated in order to belong. And now we call that submission. We call that sacrifice. And so now this person now is going to see the world through the lens of that content. So now the context is centered around that framework.
Wow. Yeah. And one of the things while you were talking, when you were talking about, relationship, of course, I'm thinking about how that framework causes people's relationship with God to be distorted as well, because you said we have relationship with people before we ever have a relationship with God, right? And so the loving God that we know the Bible teaches him to be, right?
Yes.
We almost don't even know how to accept or receive or even visualize what that love for us is because of our content with the church.
Absolutely. Well, and you think about it, Elder, you meet an authority figure first.
Yeah.
They are the standard. Their behavior, the way they teach, preach, dance, shout, speak in tongues, you're to mimic that, right? But this is the same person that is also telling you you're going to hell.
Yeah.
You see, this is where we have witchcraft practices right in the house of God. We have charismatic witchcraft going on in the house of God, and therefore we now have problems receiving or even approaching God. If you think about it, Elder, many people don't pray not because they don't want to pray. It's that they have been taught that in order for you to pray, you must go through the litany of your failures first. You don't have a right to approach God because you're not saved enough. But yet we hear at the same time, oh, you can go to God with anything. You can't, it's nothing that you can't tell God about. But now when I'm with you, you're telling me the reason you can't get an answer to God or from God is because you doing this and you doing that. So we don't get to get to God. And so many people right now are missing a valid relationship.
Yeah.
Because they can't get over our leadership.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying all leaders do this. So I know some people, I don't treat my members like that when I'm not talking to you. I'm talking about people that have been truly victimized in the house of God, wounded. and they want to serve, they want to give, but they can't even get to God in a trusting way because their first presentation is he's waiting to kill you. He's waiting for you to fail. In other words, it's a setup. So I think that content, if not careful, will be passed on to a second and third generation.
Right.
Because that's what happens. It's been passed on under the guise of holiness.
Absolutely. And I think it's imperative that us as religious leaders really should understand the scope of the responsibility that we are given when we are encountering God's people, right?
Absolutely.
Because that is the weight in which, as you said, sometimes our content, our own content, leads us to how we lead or communicate with others or develop relationship or teach the relationship with God with others, which should be examined as far as I'm concerned at this point. But another point that you made, which probably ties into this, is you talked about content and context, but then you said relationship, really a good relationship or a healthy relationship first should begin with self.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of times in our religious communities, to think about self, right, is oftentimes a no-no, right? Think about others, put people before yourself, right? That's commendable.
Mm-hmm.
But what I have found, and you can tell me if you find this, is that we have a lot of our congregations who are, of course, filled with men and women, heterosexual, homosexual, whatever, all of the other sexuals, are educated, non-educated, rich, poor, in the middle, whatever the case. When you have a full gamut of humanity in our churches, right?
Yeah.
But self-love and high or manageable or healthy self-esteem is a considerable issue and challenge within the church. How is that so?
Through erroneous teaching. All of it stems from erroneous teaching. There is a danger in one side of a story. One single story is very dangerous. There has to be more sides to this story. I've been talking to my church, and I said it's really strange to me that there are 12 gates to the city.
Uh-huh.
There are 12 gates to the city.
Yeah.
One city, 12 gates.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
There has to be more than one way.
Mm.
It has to be more than one way. There is no way that it's just one way. It's no way. All right. Now, this thing about self-love, I had to do a conference a couple of months ago called the SO conference. And everybody that was getting up, and it was troubling to me, Elder. I'm a servant of the Lord, and I just serve God's people, and everything that I can do to help somebody. It was just this whole thing, and I was sitting there very irritated. So of course I got up, and when it was my turn, I was like, you know what? I said, while it's commendable and honorable to serve, I believe that we do ourselves more damage when we do not practice healthy selfishness. There is some healthy selfishness, right?
I like that term. Yeah.
Yeah, you see what I mean? When Jesus needed to deal with himself, he left the people.
Yes.
And he went and dealt with himself.
Yeah.
And it was not offensive to the Father.
Right.
It wasn't. I cannot see. I had a conversation today with one of my clients, and she said this to me, Elder. She said, well, it seems like God is always showing me something. Somebody's coming to me with a problem, and I just feel so overwhelmed. It's like, well, God has just done this, so I guess it's for me. I said to her, the reason you don't have any rest is because you refuse to take it. It's not given to you. You must take a rest. Right? I said, we have to deal with this religious embedded theology of I'm supposed to just serve, serve, serve. It's more blessed to give than receive. But the problem is, so many people have served so by religious dogma that when it is time for them to receive, they don't know how. They reject, they're crying out for more, but settling for less. You're saying nobody thinks about me, but when they do, you say, oh, no, I don't need nothing. It's okay. Remember how grandmothers, they would buy the food, cook the food, and be the last to eat.
Right.
And so now we've been taught that'll get you into heaven. That's erroneous dogmatic teaching. If I cannot take care of me without you guilting me, how can I serve from an empty cistern? I can't. I'm giving you fumes. I'm giving you nothing. I'm giving you works of the flesh because nothing in me is fulfilled. We got to think about it. Now we're talking about Fullfilled, fulfilled. I'm filled to the fullness of God. So because I've taken care of myself without feeling that, everything I see is not for me to involve myself in.
Yeah.
I'm not going to church every time the door opens. And I'm the pastor. Okay. I'm not, I don't care if I see a need. Some needs are seen through the natural eye, but we have not received any permission from the Father to involve ourselves at all. And so now we have this thing in our churches where you should join a church and get to work. Get to work. My thing has been this, but if you go to work every day, and you get a paycheck, I'm telling you to come over here and work the same amount of hours for free and then think about heaven. The devil is a lie, speaks things that don't love Jesus. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That is coming from erroneous teaching, man. And we have done a disservice, which I also believe is the birthing place of spiritual and charismatic abuse.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, and it brings me back to this scripture when you was talking, love thy neighbor as thyself, right? And so that's the teaching of the Bible. We have our love for others has to be founded by the love that we have for ourselves, right? And so we should be teaching self-love. What did you call it? What was the tag that you use?
Healthy selfishness.
Yes, healthy selfishness, right? I have to take care of me before I can take care of you. Even when we traveling on these planes, what do they say? Take care of you first before you try to, And so it's a part of the system, right? I need to take care of me and relate to me so that I can know how to relate to others. One of the four things the four attachment styles before we leave, secure, right?
Yes.
And secure attachment, which you said that person has done a lot of work or is ongoing work that they're doing to allow themselves to be at a place where they have patience with their own journey, right? And then I may not have this one right, but anxious preoccupation.
Yes, preoccupied attachment.
Preoccupious is, and you saying that this portion is pretty dominant as it relates to fear being present and high abandonment issues, correct?
Yes.
And dismissive avoidance, right? Because now I know they've taken testimony services out of churches now, but this would be where I would raise my hand for testimony service, right? Dismissive avoidance, self-reliance, right? The person, seems to be very independent, don't need anybody. I got this, they always for everybody else, right? Supports, and suppresses their emotions.
Listen,
Which,
okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead. In my mind, that suppression of avoidance is so, suppressing emotions is where danger happens.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Because those around, and we've heard these testimonies. Well, I thought he was all right. She seemed to be doing fine. I just talked to her yesterday. We just, they just, we've seen this, but this suppression of emotions, right? Where this person is avoiding really dealing with life circumstances. It could be because of their content that they didn't want to
Absolutely.
deal with. So can
Here,
you
here
talk
are the
about that
experience.
just a little bit
Oh
more?
yeah, absolutely. The experience of, think about it. Shut your mouth.
Yeah,
You don't have a voice here. You don't pay any bills. Be quiet. You're
that's our culture.
absolutely, it's
That's
culture.
our culture. Yeah.
Absolutely. You're out of order. You're being disrespectful, even when you're just asking for clarity. You see, and so now you have learned to suppress your feelings. You've learned that if I express my feelings, I'm going to be judged, number one, and it's going to be judged harshly.
Yeah.
The other thing is, you seem weak by saying you're in pain, or to say that you're not good today. You're just weak. Man up. What's wrong with you? And this happens even in the church. I know dogmatic pastors right now that say that their children, let me tell you, I'll tell you a perfect example. A pastor had a member that died suddenly. And they said to me, they said, Mario, I'm just so disappointed. I said, why? Because the people that I thought were seasoned in God are just losing it. I'm just like, I didn't expect that from you all. And I said, but why? I said, because you're managing or suppressing yours. Does that mean that they don't have a right to express that this is detrimental to them? And why aren't you creating the space for them to say how they feel? You're theologically educated. I
Yeah.
know you know better. I know you know better. But but what I recognize, Elder, is that it was a reflection of his own suppression.
Yeah.
He has been taught to suppress how he feels, what he wants, what he desires, even. He's been taught, shut it down, deny it, right? Because that's holy, to deny yourself. All of these doctrinal beliefs that have been taken out of scripture, manipulated, twisted, turned, right, flipped to satisfy a level of control and power. And so now we have mental illness sitting up in pews, calling themselves bishops and apostles.
Yeah.
You see? And so it's very dangerous. But the other part I want to add to that is the other dangerous part is that eventually that suppression shows up in dis-ease in the body.
Yeah.
That's where it expresses itself. It expresses itself in the oppression of the nervous system because we carry trauma in our nervous system. And so this is why now people have heart attacks, strokes, cancers, all of these things that are going on because they're suppressing how they need to express themselves. And then when they explode, they go into stores and shoot up people. Because we, even in the church, we're not given that space to really be truthful about how we feel. And when we say that this is how we feel, and I'm just keeping it real, in one breath, we're saying, oh, come to him just as you are. Tell him how you feel. Take your burdens to the Lord. Oh, what needless pains we often forfeit. You know, we do the hymn. But then when we come and say this is what's going on, then you're not saved enough. You don't pray enough. You don't fast enough. But there's some things that I just have just concluded. I said this to my church, and I know a few people were upset. And I'm like, okay, but y'all will get it in a minute. Here's what I'm about to say. There are some situations, Elder, that you can open your Bible and just read it. You can go into prayer meetings and still be uncomforted. I don't care how much you say you got comfort in the scripture. You can read as many scriptures as you want to. Your humanity is not affected right now. And what I say to people all the time is, listen, God does not have a problem with your humanity as long as you don't have a problem with his divinity. That's the problem. As long as you don't have a problem with his divinity, he's not moved by your humanity. It's other humans that get upset over your humanity. And why? Because you yourself are broken. And you have made yourself the standard. Your mismanaged emotions, your overcompensating is the standard, and you expect everybody else to respond that same way. And the only way you can deal with it is to be judgmental and be critical. And so that adds insult to injury. And it happens right. He was wounded in the house of a friend.
Yeah.
Yeah. Come in.
Wow. Look, I've absolutely enjoyed our conversation and this afternoon, this evening. In our closing, if you had an opportunity to talk to a religious or spiritual leader
Mhm.
that has recognized, hey, I have been the catalyst for a lot of, I've done the hurting,
Mhm.
right? How would you, what would you say to them to if they saying, I want to readjust, I want to be reformed, let's say that. And then what would you say to just any person, a lay person, anyone that says, I recognize that I have some issues and some challenges in my context that is um, leading me in a certain way in my content,
Mhm.
and my self love is very low. So I'm kind of asking you for two things.
Sure.
How
Okay.
would you lead them?
To the leader, I would say before you address those that you've hurt, commit to finding out what's behind your behavior.
Mm,
Before you ever bring it to them, because the apology without follow-up is still a shot in the dark. You need to understand what's behind your own brokenness. You need to figure out, why was it easy to bring harm to people? Did someone mishandle you? Were you the victim and now you're the victimizer? And be okay with the answer. Tina Lilford, who played Aunt Vi on Queen Sugar, said something one day that was absolutely life-changing. They were talking about her alopecia. And she was saying, I could get hair transplants, I could keep a unit on. She says, but it's not authentic. She says, and the only way I soothed my soul was I had to remember you cannot war against what is.
wow.
And so a leader would have to say, if these things happen to me, and this is the only way I know to lead, then I need to find out how to get healed first. Before I heal them, I have to do the work myself and uncover my own bitterness, hurt, disregard, the issues of abandonment, and the feelings of failure because of how I was made to feel, or even how I was taught to serve abusive leaders under the guise of son, father, servant, leadership style. So I have to heal myself. So I would say to the leader, heal yourself. The next person, to the lay person, is I would say, be very intellectually honest about your pain, about your suffering, about your behavior, without the need to judge it as anything other than what it is.
Mm,
There has to be a root to everything. This didn't just show up. Most of this stuff is not our personality. It is coping mechanisms to ease pain. And you got to find a safe environment to do the work too. You have to have a safe climate created. This environment has to be cultivated where there is no judgment, that you can come in and say, I'm mean as hell. I'm just mean as hell, and I don't and in order for me to feel safe, I hurt people so they won't get close to me. You got to be able to say that, and someone has to be able to say, I understand. Now let's develop a strategy for you to stop, first of all, doing it to yourself, because the only reason you can do it to others is because you do it to yourself.
right.
You dismiss your own pain. You tell yourself you're stupid for feeling that way. Those things we're snared by those words. And so I would encourage a person to give themselves the space to say, just as I'm dedicated to getting a 4-year degree or getting a master's, I'm also dedicated to finding out what's behind my behavior, because I know something is wrong. People have said it. Everybody is not just saying I'm too much or they don't want to deal with me, so I cut them off first, because that's what ends up happening. Let me cut you off before you cut me off, because I expect that that's going to happen. Don't be afraid to even say, if I don't get help, I will be alone. If I don't invest in myself, if you can invest in some red bottoms, don't say you ain't got no counseling and therapy money, because you do. If you got lashes money and weed money, you got therapy money. You know what I mean? And you
Yeah.
need to invest in that, because you deserve to be whole. not just healed, but you deserve. And that's another place. Do you feel that you deserve to be whole, though? Do you feel that you deserve to be loved and to be honored because that's what you're giving out and it's not reciprocated? Is it not reciprocated because you're so hurt and broken and fearful that you push it away before you can ever land? It's no place for it to land. So that's what I would say. Listen, be bold enough to say, I need help. And it's okay. Like nobody can judge you on that. You know? Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for your professionalism and your professional words. And thank you also for the wisdom that you provided with us here today. So as we close, again, have an amazing Thanksgiving.
Likewise.
And
Likewise.
thank you so much for stopping by Sister Reach, the Preachers series. Have a great one.
Thank you so much. You too. Good night, everybody.